I never thought a donkey could turn our lives upside down, until my husband decided to train one. It started as a simple idea, one of those brilliant plans he comes up with that usually end in laughter, minor chaos, or both. But this time was different. This time, his little training experiment took on a life of its own, and before we knew it, things had spiraled way out of control. It all began when my husband Dave saw a video online about donkey whispering. Apparently, there's a special way to train donkeys using trust, patience, and a few unusual tricks. Dave, being the kind of person who never backs down from a challenge, was instantly hooked. "How hard can it be?" he said with that confident grin of his. Famous last words. Our donkey, Biscuit, had other plans. Now, Biscuit isn't your average laid-back farm animal. He's stubborn, mischievous, and somehow always seems to know exactly how to test Dave's patience. But my husband was determined, armed with a pocket full of treats and a strategy he cobbled together from YouTube tutorials. He marched into the pen, ready to prove he could become a donkey training expert overnight. The first few minutes were promising. Biscuit sniffed the treat, took a step closer, and even let Dave give him a scratch behind the ears. "See?" my husband said proudly. "He's already warming up to me." I was about to admit that maybe, just maybe, Dave was onto something when things took a sudden, unexpected turn. Biscuit's ears perked up, his tail twitched, and then, in the blink of an eye, he bolted. Not just a little trot, no, he took off like a rocket, right toward Dave. What happened next was a blur of dust, flailing arms, and a loud panicked yell that I may or may not have caught on camera. One second my husband was the confident donkey whisperer, and the next he was clinging to Biscuit's back for dear life as the donkey raced around the pen like some kind of rodeo champion. I could barely breathe from laughing, but then things got worse. Biscuit, in all his wild excitement, wasn't stopping. He was heading straight for the open gate. And Dave, well, let's just say he was about to take his donkey training to the next level, whether he wanted to or not. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a funny little mishap. This was about to become a full-blown disaster. Stay tuned, because what happened next? Even I wasn't prepared for it. I stood frozen, my heart racing as Biscuit charged toward the open gate, with Dave clinging on like an unprepared rodeo rider. "Dave, let go!" I shouted, but whether he didn't hear me or was too terrified to respond, I couldn't tell. The gate was barely hanging on its hinges, something we had meant to fix weeks ago, but kept putting off. And now, that tiny detail suddenly mattered more than anything. Biscuit had never been outside the pen unsupervised. If he got loose, who knew where he'd go, or what kind of trouble he'd cause? But the worst part, Dave was still on his back. Biscuit barreled straight through the gate, snapping the weak latch like it was nothing. Dave let out a mix of a yelp and a battle cry, gripping onto Biscuit's scruffy mane as they shot into the open field. I took off running after them, but I was no match for a determined donkey with a full-grown man on his back. My mind raced. What if Biscuit ran into the road? What if Dave actually fell and got hurt? Or worse, what if he didn't fall, and this turned into some kind of never-ending donkey rampage? From across the yard, our neighbor, old Mr. Jenkins, leaned over his fence, watching the chaos unfold. "You sure that's how you're supposed to train him?" he called out, chuckling to himself. "Not helpful, Jenkins. Not helpful at all." Meanwhile, Biscuit showed no signs of slowing down, and Dave was holding on for dear life. And then, just ahead, I saw exactly where they were headed. My stomach dropped. Biscuit was heading straight for the road, and not just any road, the one that led into town, where cars actually passed through. My heart pounded as I sprinted, shouting Dave's name, but he was too busy trying to stay upright. "Biscuit, whoa, slow down, buddy," he pleaded, but the donkey had no interest in stopping. I could hear the distant hum of a truck approaching. Oh no, this was bad, really bad, if Biscuit ran into the road at this speed. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Biscuit suddenly veered left, straight toward the one place he absolutely shouldn't go. Instead of charging into the road, Biscuit made a sharp turn, right toward Mrs. Thompson's vegetable garden. My stomach flipped. If there was one person in town you didn't want to mess with, it was Mrs. Thompson. She guarded her tomatoes like they were made of gold. "Dave, do something," I yelled, but he was too busy trying not to fly off. Biscuit plowed through the wooden fence like it was paper, sending cabbages rolling and knocking over a basket of freshly picked carrots. Then, just as Mrs. Thompson stepped outside, Biscuit skidded to a stop, sending Dave tumbling straight into her prized flower bed. Dave hit the dirt with a thud, arms flailing as he crashed right into Mrs. Thompson's roses. Biscuit, now looking rather pleased with himself, stood calmly chewing on a mouthful of squash like nothing had happened. For a long moment there was silence, except for the faint creak of the broken fence swaying in the wind. Then Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, arms crossed, her face a mix of shock and barely contained fury. "David Johnson," she said, her voice dangerously low. "Would you like to explain why you and your wild beast just destroyed my entire garden?" Dave groaned, spitting out a petal. Technically, Biscuit did most of the damage. Not the right answer. Just when I thought she was going to chase him off with a rake, she did something none of us expected. She started laughing, a deep, hearty laugh that made even Biscuit's ears perk up. "Well, I've seen plenty of messes in my life, but this is a first." As Dave sat there covered in dirt and petals, Biscuit nuzzled Mrs. Thompson's sleeve. She sighed. All right, he's cute, but you owe me a new fence and a whole lot of tomatoes." Dave sighed, brushing dirt off his shirt as he slowly stood up. Biscuit, completely unfazed by the chaos he'd caused, gave a happy little snort and went right back to munching on what was left of Mrs. Thompson's squash. I ran over, out of breath, still trying to process everything that had just happened. "I'll fix the fence," Dave mumbled, glancing at Mrs. Thompson's ruined garden, "and replace whatever Biscuit ate." She smirked, shaking her head. "You better, and maybe next time, train your donkey somewhere that doesn't involve my vegetables." At that moment, Biscuit nudged her again, this time resting his head against her arm. For all the trouble he'd caused, there was no denying he had charm. Mrs. Thompson sighed, reluctantly scratching behind his ears. "Well, at least he's got some manners." As we led Biscuit back home, Dave shot me a sheepish grin. "So, maybe I need to rethink my donkey training strategy." I laughed. "You think?" By the time we got Biscuit settled, the sun was setting, and the whole thing already felt like a ridiculous story we'd tell for years. One thing was certain: next time, Dave's brilliant ideas were staying far, far away from Biscuit.